Show don't tell is no more a rule of writing than I before E except after C is a rule of spelling. Weird, right? The truth is, there are times when you need to do one and times when you need to do the other. Good writing is a clever combination of both showing and telling. But when should you tell and when should you show? There's no hard and fast rule about this, and as my video on imagery showed, there's no strict binary either. There's not a point where you're perfectly telling and a point where you're perfectly showing and there's nothing in between. You can mix and match. How much to tell and how much to show depends on your personal style and the needs of your story. So to start with, let's define our terms. What does it mean to tell in storytelling? Essentially, telling in prose is giving the reader information directly and dryly, without appealing to or without giving him or her anything to see, hear, taste, touch, or smell. Telling employs abstractions, generalizations, and judgments rather than specific, concrete sensory details. To tell is to simplify. To tell is to summarize. To show, by contrast, is to provide the details. Showing appeals to the senses. It complicates. It slows things down. It pulls the reader in and makes them pay attention. Again, this is not binary. It's not either or. There are times you'll want to tell exclusively, and times you want to tell with just a smidge of showing, and times you want to show exclusively, and times you want to show with just a smidge of telling. And there are also times where you want to be directly in the middle of telling and showing and perfectly balanced between them. Again, it depends on your style and on the needs of your story. So let's look at a couple of examples. Take the opening paragraph of Harrison Bergeron by Kurt Vonnegut. The year was 2081 and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law. They were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. So there were a few details given in that paragraph. We're given the year, we're given the amendments, the United States Handicapper General. But were we really shown anything? Was there anything in that paragraph that appealed to our senses? Yet it sets up the story perfectly. In 7 short sentences, it gives us all the information we need about the story world to understand the story world and the story, to make sense of the story that follows. It's just a quick and dirty summary that tells us what we're in for, which might have taken pages and pages and pages to show all that information. So we have abstractions in that paragraph, the word equal and equality repeated several times. We've got generalizations. Everybody was finally equal. And we have judgments, the unceasing vigilance of the Handicapper General. But what we don't have so far is any imagery. We aren't yet in a scene. So now let's look at the opening paragraph of another famous science fiction story. This is the opening paragraph of E.M. Forster's The Machine Stops. Imagine, if you can, a small room, hexagonal in shape like the cell of a bee. It is lighted neither by window nor by lamp, yet it is filled with a soft radiance. There are no apertures for ventilation, yet the air is fresh. There are no musical instruments, and yet, at the moment that my meditation opens, this room is throbbing with melodious sounds. An armchair is in the center, by its side a reading desk. That is all the furniture. And in the armchair there sits a swaddled lump of flesh, a woman about 5 feet high, with a face as white as a fungus. It is to her that the little room belongs. So were you able to picture that room pretty well? The paragraph gives us multisensory imagery. The hexagonal shape of the room, the armchair and the reading desk. Gives us visual imagery. Hexagonal like the cell of a bee. The soft radiance of the light, the armchair and the reading desk. It gives us tactile imagery. The air is fresh. It gives us auditory imagery. the melodious sounds, even though there's no musical instruments. It does tell us a little bit. It tells us that the room is hers. But most of the other information given in that paragraph is shown to us, which means we don't actually have a whole ton of information yet, as opposed to Vonnegut's opening paragraph, which gave us a whole bunch of information, all the information we really needed to understand the story world. Here, we're only just beginning to get a grasp on the story world from this paragraph. So this is a paragraph, this Forster paragraph shows us a setting and a character. It thrusts us into the scene, and we have to pick up little bits of information as we go, instead of getting it all dumped on us. Now, neither of these is the right way to open a story. They're both great stories, they're both legendary stories in the field, and each one serves the author's purpose, what the author's trying to do. I should point out here that Harrison Bergeron is 3 pages long. The Machine Stops is 25 pages long. So in Harrison Bergeron, that telling opening, that fire hose of information that we get in the first paragraph, is necessary to the pace of the story, to give us the required information so that the story gets going right away and can keep up its pace to the very end. But The Machine Stops being a lot longer means it can take more time with its opening. It gives us that establishing shot style, descriptive paragraph opening, which is much more appropriate to its pace. We pick up the information as we go. We've got time to do that 25-page story. The Forster can take his time to show more, layering in the details as we go. But of course, Kurt Vonnegut doesn't just tell. E.M. Forster doesn't just show. They both mix it up as need be. From Harrison Bergeron, a buzzer sounded in George's head. His thoughts fled in panic like bandits from a burglar alarm. So here Vonnegut is showing us the effect of the mental handicaps that George wears in his ear. We get this image of bandits fleeing a burglar alarm, like his thoughts are fleeing from his head. From The Machine Stops, just a few paragraphs later. "Who is it?" she called. Her voice was irritable, for she had been interrupted often since the music began. She knew several thousand people. In certain directions, human intercourse had advanced enormously. Forster does give us a little bit of an image there, her irritable voice, but the rest of that, he's simply telling us this information. Her voice is irritable, she's been interrupted a lot, there's been huge advances of communication, she knows thousands of people. By the way, Forster he wrote that story in 1909, so roughly a century before the modern age of social media. So sci-fi is prescient in some scary ways. But overall, in Harrison Bergeron, Vonnegut does a lot more telling than Forster does in The Machine Stops. Forster does a lot more showing than Vonnegut does. Yet each one presents a compelling and memorable story. So again, you shouldn't try to choose between show and tell in your story. You need both. Every writer needs both. So when should you tell? You should tell when you have to give the readers information that they need to know, but that doesn't particularly advance the plot, like the socio-political context given in that opening paragraph of Harrison Bergeron. You can tell when you transition between scenes. So if one important scene takes place in a character's home and the next scene takes place at the character's workplace, you don't need to show her leaving her house, locking her door, getting into her car, locking her car door, driving to work, navigating traffic, finding a parking spot, finding her way to the workplace door, finally getting inside the building, stopping for coffee on the way. We don't need to see any of that unless it's important to the story. If nothing important happens on the journey, we don't need to experience it with our senses. We just need to hear that she drove to work. Fair enough. You can tell us that. Another time to tell might be to give brief backstory or expository info. In The Machine Stops, Forster tells us that she had been interrupted often. The character had been interrupted often. We don't need to see all of those interruptions. A quick summary will let us know what we need to know. So, by contrast, when should you show? You should show anytime you want to pull the reader into the story, which is anytime you're writing a scene. This means that every important scene, especially in your story, should be primarily shown. Of course, it's still acceptable to tell or give summary within those scenes as appropriate, but significant settings character introductions, actions, and all pivotal moments, all moments of change should be shown to get the reader more emotionally invested. You are showing anytime you use sensory details to describe a setting or character or to lay out the steps of an action or event. You're showing anytime you write dialogue, especially if you intersperse that dialogue with scene descriptions and character actions. If your story uses something that's in any way akin to traditional story structure, most stories do, then you're going to want to show all of these significant steps of that structure. The inciting incident, the midpoint reversal, the dark night of the soul, of course the climax, all of that stuff should be shown. Any points of character transformation or growth or decay should be shown. They shouldn't happen off screen. They shouldn't be summed up in a sentence or two. In short, you want to tell when you just need to give the readers some necessary information. You show when you want to get the readers emotionally invested. So practice this. While you're practicing, like this video and subscribe to the channel, but practice this. I'd recommend drafting the same short scene several times, changing which elements you show and which elements you tell each time, until you hit on the combination that has the right amount of informative summary and emotionally affecting imagery. Again, you need both. So I hope this helps you solve your own show versus tell equation. It is a very personal thing, but you have to practice it. You have to practice showing, practice telling, and figure out where that balance is. Good luck and good writing. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you next time. Peace.